Hi, my name is Arshan Lau, and today I'll be speaking with Casey Adams.
Kapapama Pimanat Mikasu Squayo Nitisina Ni Mama Judy Adams. And what I said was, my Cree name is Flying Overhead in Circles Eagle Woman, and I come from my mother, Judy Adams.
How would you describe your work?
I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm Indigenous, I'm Cree, Ojibwe, and British and Scottish descent. I have a lot of dichotomies that are going on in my work, and it is really a reflection of myself. So it's almost like a self-portrait. And I like to call myself a social practice artist. Growing up, I really didn't have a voice that I felt confident with. I really was informed by social issues. What came of my work, such as Cyborg Hybrids, was me trying to figure out who I was and where I fit in the world. The time that I created that work, I was just starting to learn about my culture because I wasn't raised with it. My father, even though he's British Métis, residential schools kind of robbed him of his culture. He raised us like a typical Canadian in a public school system. And then my mom did not like being Indigenous. I didn't feel comfortable being considered Indigenous. And then at the same time, because of physically what I looked like, people immediately had these assumptions about me. Somebody said, it must have been difficult for you growing up on the reserve. And I had no idea what they were talking about. I had a boyfriend who said, oh, it must have been difficult having alcoholism in your family. And again, I had no idea what they were talking about and why were these labels being pressed upon me. So I was able to sort of reinvent how I wanted to be seen in the world. I was starting to come out, I guess, with my identity. That's where that work was born. I've had a lot of people identify with the Cyborg Hybrid series. I had non-Indigenous women come up to me and say, I was adopted. I didn't know where I came from. I just found out my birth family. I was raised Ukrainian, but now I'm finding out that I'm German. And so it was so they said, I really didn't know where I fit. And then I saw your work and it made me feel like I can make my own definition of where I belong. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that, people would connect on that level to this work. And really, it was just me trying to figure out where I fit in the world.
Speaking of stereotypes, I was at a bar and it was getting late. It was maybe like midnight. A couple minutes after I left, this person had followed me and he said, I think you look really nice for an Indian person. I had a few drinks and I felt really loose. I just turned around and looked him up and down and said, well, thank you, but you just look okay for a white person. And
yeah, I get things like that. It's more, you speak so eloquently. It's older white women that usually do that to me. They always have to comment about how eloquent I sound.
Has the way you approach your work changed over time?
Yes, absolutely. Over time, I felt comfortable with working with people, understanding that it's a reciprocal kind of relationship. So the people in my photo series, that was me fostering a relationship with them, being part of the process as well, and just letting them know that you're in safe hands and I would never let your image be shown unless you're okay with it. I really started to get involved in ceremonies. That kind of changed my ability to work with people.
What inspires you?
I think injustices, but also thinking about the world in a better way. Hope inspires me. I'm a very optimistic person, so I really want to imagine a world that I want to live in. The only way I can do that is through action. My ability to reach a large audience and to speak with an honest voice is where I have strength, and I can't beat myself up for not being able to make huge changes. But if we all sort of create little changes, then things can happen and things can improve. That's what inspires me a lot, is hope.
What sort of problems fuel you?
I do a lot of research and I do a lot of reading. I look to social media and I look to pop culture. I'm kind of like a sponge. So all this information is constantly being absorbed. One day it'll come to me. This has been bugging you. This is how you can approach this problem. Racism is a big issue for me. The destructions of our lands and waters. Sometimes the negative side of technology really affects me. But I never know what's going to trigger me to create something. Perception was really born out of feeling those racism and discrimination myself. And then I felt comfortable in asking other members of the community who felt the same way to lend their voice and lend their faces and to speak out along with me. I don't feel comfortable in sharing other people's grief when it's not my grief. And that's where I draw the line. When it comes to these social practice pieces that I do, I feel it's really important that whoever I work with feel comfortable that I'm going along that journey with them. Blood memory has really dictated my work and my process. My grandmother was phenomenal at just picking up anything and creating with it, with food, with materials. She could sew anything. And then it passed down to my mother. My mother built a room with no knowledge whatsoever. She just kind of imagined it and figured it out and just did it. I started thinking about how the women in my lineage, they had to do a lot of tasks. They had to do a lot of creating their clothing, their shoes, their tools. They were in charge of building the shelters. So there was a lot of responsibilities for the women. And I realized that my practice is really about following the footsteps of those women. I am jumping from medium to medium because that's exactly what my ancestors did. The beginning of my career, people saw me as a ceramic artist. And then I moved into installation and they said, oh, well, you're an installation artist. And then I moved into digital photography and they're like, oh, you're a photographer. So finally, eventually people kind of realized, oh, wait a minute, we can't quite classify her. She keeps moving around and changing. I can't imagine staying with one medium. And that is because of my ancestral history. We may not necessarily be aware that our choices and our decisions are based on choices and decisions that were made by our ancestors. I think that's so exciting. Monarch butterflies, they never meet their parents, and yet they know where to go. They travel, hundreds and thousands of kilometers, but they have no idea. And why is that? Because blood memory is imprinted in their DNA, and they know to go and they know to travel. To think that we don't have a blood memory is kind of ridiculous to me. But scientists have finally agreed that yes, we do have a blood memory. It's interesting how scientists are finally catching up to Indigenous knowledge.
How did you navigate intervening public space with perception?
The issue with visual arts is that it's in this institution, it's in this white box, and curators are the gatekeepers, and they choose whose work is going to be seen. The number of people who actually go to an exhibitions, the numbers are very, very low. And I really wanted a large audience to see it. That's what spurred me. I thought, that's it. I need to do this art piece for social media so that it can be shared. And then it's not being put inside an institution. The news picked that up. I was on national television. It was in the Globe and Mail. But one of my interviews, I had said, I really wish this work could be seen on a huge scale, like a physical scale, like billboards, bus shelters, and posters. And that's exactly what happened. So Urban Shaman Gallery said, we wanted to do a special project. We'd like to do it with you. They raised $70,000 through corporate sponsorship, which they had never done anything like that before. People were just like, yeah, we want this conversation to happen. Let's do it. We had the support of the mayor. They didn't put any money in, but they're like, we'll promote it for you. We'll get the mayor to tweet about it. When it went into Winnipeg, it was amazing. And the people that posed in the series, I just put a call out and I said, If you want to participate, just contact me. And I never turned anyone down. And then I would make arrangements to take their photos. I would edit it. And then once they felt they were happy with their words and their image, then I would send it out. It was amazing that they felt so much pride in being able to share their voice and their experience, and that people could feel their hurt, but then feel their joy. It's true that they say that traditional methods of print media really do work. And so I was kind of capitalizing on that.
I'm often reminding people that art is a form of media, and we all have learned that media influences us to like certain things or behave a certain way or live a certain lifestyle and like have certain dreams. Media is so powerful, and to intervene in public space with these like traditional media platforms.
Oh yeah, they really work. They really work because, we're all very visual and we pick up these like subtle cues through our eyes. We can instantly pick up on a feeling through these advertisings, right? And so I was really playing with that. I really wanted to have that kind of impact.
What does traditional and contemporary mean to you?
Definitely when I started my practice, I didn't know what traditional really meant. I would tell people, oh, yeah, I'm Indigenous, but that's fine. It doesn't really matter. I'm assimilated. And this was like my thought process as a young adult. I didn't understand the impact of my words. I didn't understand how I was missing so much. I wasn't interested in identifying myself as Indigenous, kind of like my father and my mother. While I was proud of who I was, I had no connection to it. Now I feel that I can bring those two ideas together. Now that I have a better understanding of traditional art and the strength and beauty that comes with it, especially if you look at some of the older works, land knowledge is placed in every single one. Spirit, ceremony, family knowledge, the creation process, it's all embedded into these pieces. So you can't look at the work like you would from a Western point of view. You can't look at it and say, oh, well, that's just a bag that it carried medicine. It's not the same approach and the same way of thinking. You have to understand that this is a reflection of a spiritual mindset. My Western upbringing had no concept of, because I saw water and land as commodities, just like everyone else. I've had to radically shift my thinking about what traditional art is and understand the value of it before I could actually start using it in my own practice. So I did a show called Gakigachuan in 2020, and we had to do it online. And what I did was I had an elder by the name of Sherry Kopanis, who's been teaching me about water knowledge. And I had her say water teachings in her Ojibwe language, but I didn't want the translations. I wanted her to say the words so that you could feel it flow over you. So I really wanted that knowledge to be shared, but in her language. I'm recognizing that the past technology was used, but in a different way of how we think of technology. Today, we use the technology so that we can communicate with one another. And that is just as important as their technology in the past. And so I'm bringing the past and the present together to lead us forward in a good way for the future. I don't claim ever to be a knowledge keeper. There's some things that I feel like, yes, I am a knowledge keeper when it comes to talking about Indigenous clay. I make sure that I bring in the proper knowledge keepers in helping me guide traditional teachings. I'd love it to eventually be considered a traditional, or a knowledge keeper. I would love that a lot, but I feel like I'm still learning. I'm still on that pathway, and that's okay. That's why bringing in an elder as part of the process is so important.
As a queer person, I couldn't identify, or I was never told about any other queer people in my family. Sometimes traditional things upset me. So then I started working with materials like embroidering, ceramic, like practices that were involved with like my heritage,
Hmm.
and using these like traditional materials and creating space for new ideas.
Hmm.
When you think about the future, what does it look like to you?
Well, I always want to think the best, but I also understand that it's important to look to our past to understand where we're going. Everything kind of goes in cycles, and we're experiencing a cycle right now, right? I don't want to think this way, but I mean, I saw the pandemic coming. I knew it was going to happen. I was very familiar with what was going on in 1912, the irresponsibility, the sort of divide that was happening with the US. I saw that coming too, because I've seen it in the past. I've seen it throughout history. We've experienced a glow for the longest time. You know, my generation, my parents, especially their generation, they were a part of a boom that was exciting. So many things were available to them, all these wonderful opportunities. I feel like we're shifting gears because of globalization, lack of thinking local, and consumerism. So, all of these, plus the change in our environment, we can't keep going in this kind of direction. Fossil fuels, we can't keep digging up coal and burning it. All of these things are contributing towards a future that I can see coming. It's a little bleak, you know, it's hard for me to say that, but at the same time, I do what I can in terms of trying to teach people the importance of protecting our waters, because that is going to become a major issue in the near future. So perception in some way is kind of like my big master plan, where we can humanize one another and sort of relate to one another so that we can work together, so that we can protect our waters. So we all need to wake up to that. And that is my hope. My hope is that we come together and that we educate the next generation and we help them move towards protecting our waters and our land and the little creatures that exist. If we can make those slight changes, and if we can get policymakers to make those changes, if we come together in unity, I think we can help our planet a little bit and help the next generations, you know, the future generations. I kind of look at what's been happening the past, I'd say 20 years. Growing up in the 80s, you would never, ever, ever see same-sex relationships on TV. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And then the AIDS crisis happened. So there was a lot of fear involved during that time. And now we look at Canada today, where same-sex marriages are not only accepted, but celebrated, and that you see these beautiful relationships on TV. I mean, that's such a short window of time. So when I look at things like that, and I think about how we come together to change perceptions, it just makes me feel like we have that ability to make change. And so it's kind of a doom and gloom, but kind of hopeful way of looking at the world too. Hence my ability to always have that dichotomy going on in my life. I find joy on a daily basis in giving my son a hug and my cat snuggling up with me. And even though it's like freezing outside, that sun just shining on me just gives me joy. It's so important to acknowledge the beauty that goes on around you. One of my strengths throughout my entire life is my ability to see joy in the little things and texture, touching things and feeling things and experiencing all those things. It's pretty incredible. It's something that is really important to me. And I try to tell people this whenever I address a room, is that I hope that you too will do what I do. And that is when I meet somebody, I think, what can I learn from that person? So I keep myself open to the person in front of me, and I think, what can this person teach me? And even if they're in a bad mood, I leave myself open and generous to them so that they can teach me, because everyone has knowledge. Everyone has a story. Everyone is important and they can teach you something. Now imagine a world where everybody felt that way.